the most insane punishments during the Khmer Rouge regime. In just under 45 months that the Khmer Rouge were in power in Cambodia, from 1975 to 1979, they were responsible for the deaths of between 1.6 and 3 million Cambodian civilians. These deaths were caused by starvation, torture, execution, medical experiments, untreated diseases, forced marches, forced labor, and other forms of violence. Nonetheless, the Khmer Rouge continued to operate in secluded areas of the country far beyond 1979. As a result, the number of deaths may be larger than what has been reported. Looking at the punishments he used during his tenure will shock you to your core. The Khmer Rouge regime was infamous for its practice of using severe punishments for even the most trivial of offenses. These punishments consisted of the following. Punishments on women in the Khmer regime. The cadre of Khmer Rouge transported 3 women to a dozen other prisoners while they were naked, forced them to sit on the ground, and then used pliers to cut their faces, including their noses, ears, cheeks, and lips. They then poured acid into the cuts. Once the women had passed out, someone brought them water and brought them back to consciousness. If the woman was unable to provide satisfactory responses to the questions that were posed to her, then she would be hung from a hook that would pass through her lips and throat. A soldier sliced into her chest and took her heart, liver, and gallbladder out of her body. Women were forced to enter into sexual relationships and marriages under the fear of being put to death if they refused to do so. As a kind of punishment for their defiance, their spouses or the officers of the Khmer Rouge would sexually assault them. The initiative entitled Women in Transitional Justice in Cambodia found that the majority of the victims were females. In the final result of the project, it has stated that 96.6% of survey respondents had been subjected to a forced marriage. In instances where the respondents had directly refused, they had been subjected to verbal threats, imprisonment, sexual abuse, and forced labor. In addition, 80.1% of people who got married were subsequently sexually assaulted after the wedding. Execution of enemies. Pol Pot, a radical Marxist who later led the Khmer Rouge regime, had the idealistic goal of establishing an agricultural utopia in Cambodia when he established it. To do this, he and those who followed him vigorously pushed forward their ideal of an ideal society. Anybody who resisted the dictatorship was labeled an enemy of the state and subjected to severe punishments. This was the case regardless of the nature of their opposition. The use of forced labor as a form of punishment was extremely frequent. Opponents of the administration were incarcerated in labor camps, where they were made to work under deplorable conditions for extended periods. They were frequently beaten or even put to death if it was determined that they were working at too sluggish of a pace. The execution was another form of punishment that was frequently used by Khmer Rouge. Opponents of the dictatorship were frequently subjected to public executions in which they were either shot or beheaded. The executions were carried out to instill fear among the populace and to serve as a warning to anyone who might consider rebelling against the dictatorship. Torture was a common practice under the Khmer Rouge regime, which was notorious for it. Those who were being held captive were frequently subjected to physical and psychological abuse, including being beaten and made to listen to the screams of other detainees. The dictatorship of the Khmer Rouge was widely regarded as one of the most repressive in human history. The use of forced labor and the death of those who opposed the dictatorship was evidence of the regime's callousness and disrespect for human life. It is imperative that the atrocities committed by the Khmer Rouge dictatorship do not become lost to history. Forced to make a fabricated confession. People were subjected to coercion in the form of forced confession so that they would admit to committing crimes that they had not committed. People were coerced by the Khmer Rouge into confessing to crimes such as spying, working with the enemy, and any other form of opposition to the regime. Individuals were frequently subjected to torturous treatment until they consented to make a fabricated confession. Individuals who refused to confess were frequently put to death as a result. The Khmer Rouge also frequently resorted to the practice of public shaming as another method of meting out punishment. Individuals were made to stand in front of a big crowd and confess their crimes while being watched by onlookers. This was done to reduce them to a state of humiliation and shame so that they would comply. Individuals were also made to wear placards that branded them as either criminals or traitors against their will. Cannibalism. Cannibalism in humans refers to the act of consuming the flesh or internal organs of other individuals, whether as a one-time event or as a regular practice. One who engages in the act of cannibalism is referred to as a cannibal, and the term cannibalism has been adopted by the field of zoology to refer to the practice of one member of a species consuming all or part of another member of the same species for the purpose of obtaining food. This practice can also refer to sexual cannibalism. The consumption of human organs in Cambodia, particularly in the context of battle, may be dated back hundreds of years. Although the practice of cannibalism was relatively popular during the Pol Pot administration, in comparison to other periods, the practice can be traced back far further. Deportations of people from their homes. One of the cruelest methods of retribution utilized by the Khmer Rouge dictatorship was the systematic uprooting and expulsion of people from their homes without their will. People were forcibly removed from their houses and relocated to labor camps and other regions as part of the Khmer Rouge's agenda. Individuals were coerced into abandoning their homes, frequently without any prior warning, and frequently with nothing more than the clothes on their backs. Individuals who refused to evacuate the area were frequently put to death. Individuals that were relocated received very little to no food or water and were forced to work in harsh labor camps under brutal conditions. Moreover, they were given no choice but to perform their forced labor. In addition, the Khmer Rouge uprooted people from their houses and exiled them. Individuals were taken from their homes against their will and incarcerated in facilities referred to as re-education camps, where they were subjected to both indoctrination and brainwashing. Individuals who refused to obey were frequently subjected to torture and ultimately put to death. Others were also transported by the Khmer Rouge to other countries, including Vietnam, where they suffered additional atrocities and were exploited for their labor. Torture. Torture was used as one of the most severe forms of punishment during the time of the Khmer Rouge dictatorship. Individuals were punished in a variety of inhumane and bizarre ways, including being beaten, receiving electric shocks, and sometimes being put to death. This was done to instill fear among the populace and maintain control over them, as well as to exact revenge on individuals who opposed the rule. The rule of the Khmer Rouge was one of the most repressive and barbaric to exist in the 20th century. Those who had opposed the rule or were judged to be disloyal were subjected to harsh punishments, such as being made to perform risky forms of forced labor. The living circumstances in the prison were deplorable, and the inmates were only given 2 to 3 spoons of almost tasteless porridge twice a day for their meals. The porridge appeared to contain little more than a single grain of rice at most. In order to stave off death by famine, prisoners were compelled to resort to eating rats and other insects. Only a small amount of water was provided, and anyone who requested more was severely thrashed. The only time everyone had a shower was once a month, if at all. The bathroom consisted of a small ammunition box, and if any waste leaked out, the prisoners were forced to lick it off the floor. The legacy of the Khmer Rouge is still alive and well today, and it serves as a reminder of the brutality and inhumanity that can occur under a totalitarian society. That's all for the video today. We'll be right back soon. If you want to watch more such videos, then don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel.